you and good evening, everyone. Tonight I will be arguing that economic oppression causes gender inequality because the participation of women in the workforce is essential not only for lowering poverty amongst women, but also toward raising household income and elevating women's status and power in their homes and in their communities. Education, employment, and ownership rights of women have a powerful influence on their ability to control their environment and contribute to their economic, social, and political development of their societies. Economic participation concerns not only the actual number of women participating in the labor force, but also on their access to equal pay. Outside of the agricultural sector in both developed and developing countries, women are still averaging less than 78% of the wages given to men for the same work. A lack of female participation in the workforce perpetuates the traditional patriarchal institutions in a society. Recent studies conducted by UCLA professor Michael Ross in the American Political Science Review argue that despite common belief, the patriarchal traditions that prevail in Middle Eastern countries is not a result of Islamic traditions in the region, but instead the culprit is oil production, as it stimulates economic growth that reduces the number of women in the workforce. When economic growth is based on oil industrialization, it encourages women to join the workforce and results in greater equality. On the contrary, when economic growth is based on oil and mineral extraction, women are discouraged from entering the labor market, thus increasing the gender gap. Oil production slows a society's economic growth and social progress, and produces a phenomenon known as the Dutch disease, a condition characterized by an influx of foreign currency and new wealth generated by oil sales, which then raises the real exchange rate in a region. This makes it cheaper for locals to import goods rather than export goods and produce them within their own countries. Thus, the economy shifts away from the traded goods sector to the non-traded goods sector. The demand for non-tradable goods favors construction and retail services, which are industries dominated by men and discourage female participation. Oil booms hinder the traded or export-oriented sectors of the economy, which constitute the bulk of female employment in the developing world. When oil production favors men, women are discouraged from joining the workforce because if their husbands are gaining more income, they have less incentive to go into the workforce, and their wages are decreased because less is invested in the traded goods sector that is dominated by women. And by traded goods, it's industrialized goods that are exported, such as clothing and textiles. Islamic states such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and the United Arab Emirates are the richest in oil and rank amongst the lowest countries on the World Economic Forum's Index on Gender Rights. These states are most reluctant in granting female suffrage and have the lowest female representation in government and the fewest number of women working in the non-agricultural sectors of the workforce. On the other hand, there are Islamic states such as Lebanon, Tunisia, and Morocco that have very little oil wealth or zero oil wealth, but they rank higher on the Gender Rights Index and have greater female participation in the workforce and politics. This shows that it is not Islamic traditions in these regions that is subjugating women, it is the oil industry, because economic oppression is what causes gender inequality, because when women do not have access to income, they are subservient on their male counterparts. Presence in the workforce empowers women because access to personal income makes them less dependent on male counterparts, and they don't have to rely on a man to provide for them. This makes women less vulnerable to sexual exploitation and violence. And the failure of women to join the non-agricultural workforce leads to higher fertility rates, less education, and infringements on their basic human rights. And this gives them less influence in their homes and their communities. When women are confined to the home, they are less likely to exchange information, mobilize politically, or lobby for their rights. In case studies in Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia also demonstrate that it is not Islam in the Middle East that subjugates women, because Algeria is an Islamic country that is very rich in oil, and women in Algeria are highly subjugated. They have fewer women in parliament, whereas countries like Morocco and Tunisia are far more religiously conservative, yet women enjoy greater rights compared to men. Morocco has one of the highest numbers of female representatives in their government. So in order to refute my colleague's argument that gender inequality is a consequence, that is not true, because when you don't have access to an income, that is what truly hinders your ability to gain your equal rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Florian. Though I don't argue that preventing women from working can actually hurt them and oppress them, I do feel that the problem stems from gender inequality, and as a result, economic oppression is a consequence. Women constitute half of the world's population, perform nearly 2/3 of the work hours, receive 1/10 of the world's income, and own less than 1/100th of the world's property. 42% of America's 1.6 million homeless youth identify as lesbian or gay. Unemployment rates for transgender individuals are twice as high as the general population, and women are 35 times more likely to be poor than men. This is a direct consequence to gender inequality. Earlier I spoke about Friedrich Engels' theory of how women's oppression started, excuse me, and how it consequently led to economic oppression. His theory was largely based upon the pioneering research of the 19th century anthropologist Lewis Henry Morgan. Morgan argued that human society had evolved through successive stages based upon development. In order to appreciate the contribution of Engels and Morgan, it is necessary to realize that Darwin laid out his theory of human evolution just a few years earlier. First with the publication of The Origin of Species in 1859, followed by The Descent of Man in 1871. All of these men's arguments are the same. Society and men change over time. If we understand the transition they described, it becomes clear that over thousands of years, society has made the decision that men should make more money than women. This idea stems from the thought that women aren't as strong as men, and this idea is false. And like I said before, it's a misunderstanding. As a result, the economic oppression that women and other genders face today is a consequence of gender inequality. Economic oppression is not a cause of gender inequality, but in fact it's a consequence.
So my colleague brought up Marx and Engels and their theories about economic oppression. Engels argues that gender inequality is in fact caused by economic oppression because after the Industrial Revolution, women in the workforce, women entered the workforce and they were forced to enter into segregated labor units, and that differentiated between men doing certain jobs and women doing other jobs. And and the idea of separate spheres arose, and women were confined to the household while men went off to work. This definitely infringes upon women's rights because when they're confined to the home, they are less likely to converse with other women and they're less likely to exchange information, mobilize politically, or lobby for their rights. So when women are able to gain access to equal work and equal pay, they demand their equal rights and are able to increase their equality with men. So therefore, economic oppression is caused by gender inequality. Thank you.